Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I've got an exciting first impressions to do for you. This one's actually really exciting for me. I was kind of nervous about this knife getting here, and if you watch my unboxing, that'll probably make more sense. I just shot my unboxing late last night, and then I got up pretty early this morning. I threw this knife right in my pocket. I've been playing with it all morning. I carried it up here on my hike, and it is now 1 o'clock, so it's been in pocket like a half a day, and I've really been giving a lot of attention to this knife because if you watch my unboxing, you can get the kind of story behind this, but I have had less than favorable experiences with all of the giant mouse knives that I've owned in the past. I had a GM2, I had a Biblio, and I had an Iona. The Iona I had for 5 minutes before I put it back in the box to return it. The Biblio, I had it for 10 minutes before I decided the action was just not acceptable to me. I put it back in the box and sold it. And then the GM2 I had for a while. I really tried to give that knife a fair shot, and I found that when I middle finger flicked it, it was acceptable, but the way that the detent was dialed on that knife, it just drove me bananas. That it had a flipper tab, and when I used the flipper tab, it was actually kind of difficult to get it to deploy all the way. It was like here or here most of the time. And when I use a flipper tab, I expect my knife to lock up. I don't know if you do, that's me. And when I talked to, I think I messaged on Instagram Giant Mouse at the time and asked them if that was normal or if it was something I could send in to have repaired. And I feel like, if I remember correctly, I don't mean to like drag them through the mud, they're great guys, but I think the answer I got back was something along the lines of some people prefer a softer detent, some people prefer a firmer one. So on that one, it just happened to get a softer detent. That drove me nuts. So I sold that knife because the only other option, and part of me kicks myself because I think it would have been almost perfect if I had done this, but if I had ground off the flipper tab, the way that the detent functioned for middle finger flicking the knife was actually pretty good. It wasn't as good as this one, spoiler alert, we'll talk about that, but it was acceptable. And everything about that knife was so cool. It was really awesome, well done, fluted carbon fiber that had this milled texture in it. It was this really cool, like, internal one side mounted liner that allowed it to lock up while being carbon on both sides. And other than that, it was linerless, and it was like a really cool design that I dug, and I liked carrying it, I liked cutting with it, but I couldn't get over that. So all of my previous giant mouse knives have just been flops for me personally, but I know so many people, so many who adore giant mouse. I know people who own every model they've ever made, all of the GM 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, now 6, even the P ones of those, which are like the pirate versions, which are usually darker in color and even more limited. And then they also own all of their Ace series like this one, and they love them. It's like there are people I know who it's their favorite brand, undoubtedly. And so it's been frustrating for me that I see so many people loving them and people who I know have good taste in knives. And so am I just getting bad, like, lemons out of the box? Or I don't know what has gone wrong on my previous ones. I know that the Iona I just also didn't like. To be fair, it was not within my taste, and the thing that did it in was the access to the lock bar was really uncomfortable to get to disengage the lock, and it was just, the knife didn't speak to me in any way, shape, or form. I thought it was going to maybe be kind of a bug out killer with its deep carry clip and its plastic handles, super lightweight, M390, better steel than they had up to that point ever offered on a bug out. And so it was just like, when it came out of the box, I didn't like it. Blech, I returned it. Anyway, all of that being said, I was a little nervous about this one because it's been probably a year and a half, maybe even more, since I've had a giant mouse, since I've even handled a giant mouse, and I've been hearing that they have been doing some of their production in the Riyadh factory. I thought this one, when I ordered it, was in the Riyadh factory, but it's not. This one was made in Italy. But they seem to have been making steps to do things to eradicate those issues that I had previously found for me personally. So I've been more and more intrigued by them, and I've seen some of their models come out, and the designs I usually like, but there haven't been any that I've like loved. Although the GM5, which is this, I really, really liked the design of it, but it was a little expensive, and I I thought about getting one. And if I'd had the money right at the right time, I might have, but it just didn't happen. And anyway, the good news is now this is basically a production version of a GM5. And it's the design they've come out with in the last few years that I like the most. And it's in the size category that for me right now, where I am in life and what my carry habits are, is pretty perfect. And I happen to also like micarta better than titanium. For a knife this size, with this blade steel, kind of this philosophy of use that I see for it, this in my mind should be kind of a Shaman competitor. My Spyderco Shaman is an outdoor kind of bruiser knife that also fits in an EDC roll, and it's overbuilt and it's big and it's beefy. It's not super overweight, but it's not like focused on being lightweight either. But mine's wearing Taro Tough scales. This one's wearing micarta. My Shaman's in Rex 45. This is an Elmax. Like, we're talking a pretty competitive space all of a sudden for this knife and the Shaman. Anyway, if this knife came out of box, and I said this in my unboxing, if you find any of this so far interesting, you should probably watch that video. Although it was super late at night and I was kind of delirious, so I'm still not positive how that went. But if this came out of box and had a weak D10, I would have been done with Giant Mouse forever. I might have been persuaded into trying one of the ones that they make at the Reat factory eventually, but I'd certainly have been done with Italian Giant Mouse knives. If it had been wildly off center, or had blade play, or if there were any apparent issues right out of the box with this knife, I would have been done. I just would have. And so that was kind of what made me a little nervous about it, because on paper, I knew that this knife should be an absolute hit for me. All the ingredients we're talking about here, the size, the dimensions, the weight, the pocket clip, everything about this should be a home run for what I like in knives. And so if it was at all off, it was going to be such a letdown. But the good news is, I'm not let down at all. I'm really not. And part of me is a little worried that maybe I'm looking at it through a prism of, I was expecting it to maybe be bad. So anything that's good looks great when you were expecting bad. Like, it's with low expectations, it's easier to be impressed. But I don't even, as I'm really like trying to walk myself through my own thought process, which is a weird thing to say, but as I'm trying to identify what my expectations were of the knife, my expectations were actually still really high of the knife, because both the designers behind Giant Mouse knives, Anso and Voxnays, they both independently and together make designs that I really like, and generally have very good ergos for my hands, generally work really well for me. And the materials were all right, and most Italian knives that I've had have been well made and nice. And so I don't think I was really expecting this one to be what the other ones were. I was hopeful that it was going to be what it actually is. So the news is good about this one. And I don't mean to drag Giant Mouse knives through the mud. Obviously, like I said, there's tons of people who have said all the positive things you can say about them as knife companies go, and have meant it. And they're people that I trust. And so I have to assume that some of the ones that I got just weren't up to snuff, just weren't QC'd quite properly or something. I don't know. But this one, let's talk about this one. So, real quick, because I'm already a few minutes in and this is just a first impressions. So far, what have I experienced with it? That's important to say. This is a first impressions video. I've carried it all morning. I've played with it a ton. If it hasn't been in my pocket, it's been in my hand because I've been playing with it. I processed a little bit of cardboard with it before I got in the car to come up here, just because I wanted to see how it did at that. And it was fine. It was excellent at cutting cardboard. It better be. What knife that I'm going to buy in today's day and age is going to suffer at cutting through cardboard? It was great. Is it the sliciest knife that I own or have owned or have ever cut with? No, definitely not. But that's not the designed intention of a big kind of beefy Micarta and Elmax, like outdoorsy designed knife. So there's still a lot more testing to come. But so far I've cut some cardboard and it's been in my pocket and I've played with it a lot. And for everything I've done with it, it's been excellent. The way that this carries with this wire deep carry clip, it's fantastic. For a knife this size and weight, it carries phenomenally. It's really, really good. This wire clip is what a wire clip should be. It comes all the way to the very butt of the knife. When this is in pocket, you don't see knife, you just see clip. That's what a deep carry clip should be, in my opinion. I don't understand sometimes people that put deep carry clips on knives, like from a design philosophy, not people who add them per se, but if you put the clip where it mounts like all the way down here, and then by adding deep carry, you still have this much of the knife sticking out of your pocket. A deep carry clip should go all the way to the end of the knife. That's just the way I feel. So this deep carry clip nails it. I also adore wire clips. If you haven't heard, I think they function fantastic. I think they look unassuming, which is generally a pretty good thing about having a knife. It's the antithesis of the Chavez skull clip, which I get that some people like those aesthetically. I can't stand them. I really don't like that type of clip because it doesn't function as well as this does in my experience. It looks kind of tacky when clips are overbuilt like that. This is an ideal clip to me, is what I'm trying to say. And the profile of this knife is fantastic. There's no flipper tab on it anywhere. Everything is nice and rounded. And this micarta is like a natural smooth micarta texture, where micarta is a miracle material in the sense that it can be smooth to the touch like this, but when you're gripping it, it grips so well. It grips as well as like gritty, like cross pattern G10. Just naturally, the way that the material interfaces with human skin, it grips well when you're gripping it. But if you're just sliding it in and out of pocket, where you've got to pass material through this, like, it's very smooth. So I love micarta, and this micarta is excellent. Giant Mouse does micarta super well. It's contoured just slightly. You can see there's this contouring here. All the edges are knocked down and they are smooth, and the ergos with the micarta, it works really, really well. So it's a total win for carry. For this size of knife and weight of knife, it carries more comfortably than my Shaman does. And that's impressive because my Shaman carries really well. I actually quite like carrying my Shaman, but this is just a little bit more comfortable, feels a little bit better in pocket. We've got this awesome titanium backspacer here, which even reaching in my pocket to get my wallet, it's not sharp, there's nothing aggressive there. There's this tiniest bit of jimping, which I don't think really serves much of a purpose other than maybe it's a design element, but it's fine. I don't feel it there, it doesn't bother me, and it's nice tight jimping that's not sharp or aggressive. We've got an integrated lanyard hole, which is out of the way. That's the most important thing that a lanyard hole can ever be, in my opinion, because I never use a lanyard hole on any knife for any reason. I disagree with lanyard holes on a philosophical level. I wish they didn't exist. So for one to just be tucked out of the way, where it will not bother me at all, that's a win for a lanyard hole. That's a fine place to put one if you feel the need to put a lanyard hole on a knife. That's acceptable. So, backspacer, excellent. Scales, excellent. Clip, phenomenal. The deployment, and this was really important because detent was a big issue on 2 of the 3 Giant Mouse knives that I've gotten rid of, at being like the terminal reason for them. So, this one, nice and crispy. For a thumb hole deployment, first of all, holes are greater than studs, never forget that. But for a hole deployment, both with my thumb or with my middle finger, it is excellent. It deploys reliably, it feels intuitive, it feels like a deployment should for this method. If this had a flipper tab on it, I don't know whether it would be too soft or too hard. It doesn't have a flipper tab. We didn't mess with that. I prefer this knife without a flipper tab. This feels right to me in terms of deployment. Let's talk a little bit about the blade. Our stock thickness, it's just about perfect in my opinion. I don't know, maybe it's 150,000. Like, I don't know. I haven't put calipers on it. I'm sure someone else will. I'm sure there's already videos out there with dimensions on this. What I'll say is the feel of it, the way that it actually works in application, is excellent. It feels probably just slightly thinner in blade stock than my Shaman, if I had to guess. I know I'm drawing a lot of parallels here, but that's, spoiler alert, there's going to be a head-to-head video between this knife and that one, because I think they deserve to be pitted up against each other. But it's a perfectly thick blade stock for being robust enough that it has the amount of strength I would expect from a knife in this category. It's not so thin that it's like I'm worried about any kind of fragility, but it's not overly thick for no reason either, which is also very important to me. I don't like the idea of just adding thickness to add cool factor and then losing cutting performance. On some blades, a lot of thickness makes a lot of sense. This I don't think would be one of them, so I dig that, especially because we're working with a flat grind. If this was super thick, we would need a hollow grind, and I like this knife with a flat grind for its designed purpose. I think this will perform well outdoors. This will be an excellent primary folder for someone like me who wants to take a folder out in places like this and use it for things that are kind of aggressive to use a knife for. So I dig the stock thickness. I dig the grind. The behind the edge thickness feels like it might be just a hair thinner than my Shaman if I'm not crazy, and it feels totally reasonable to me. Passing it through cardboard today, it sliced like a dream. It cut very well. The edge that they put on it is fantastic. The bevel is even, both sides, and it looks and functions really, really great. Another thing that I should mention, you'll notice the whole show side of the knife, there is no billboarding, nothing. There's nothing written on this blade, on the scales, which would be weird, but it's not written, nothing is on there. On the clip side, we get the Giant Mouse logo, and it says Ace, which means this is an Ace version of the knife. It's production. That's the only billboarding you see anywhere. They didn't even write Elmax on the blade. I love that. If you look inside, which I don't think I'm possibly going to be able to show you, it's just not going to work, but it says Vox Anso around the Giant Mouse logo, laser etched in there, made in Italy, Elmax. And it's really tasteful, well done little engraving in there that tells you the information you need to know about this knife, but they've hidden it on the nested liner inside the knife. Great call. I dig that. I don't like a bunch of billboarding for no reason on the blade. I think this knife looks way better without fussing with any of that inscription. Oh, that's crazy. There's two ravens going after a red-tailed hawk. Gnarly. Anyway, this looks better without any of that on there. So I love that they just went ahead and etched it internally on the nested liner. That was the right thing to do in my opinion. Now, the last thing I'll say about the blade, and probably my most favorite thing about it, is that they've rounded the spine. Giant Mouse does this, from what I understand, on all their knives. Any Giant Mouse that I've handled has had this done. Actually, I don't know if the Iona did. Probably did. I didn't have that knife for more than a couple minutes, so I'm not positive. But rounding a spine, I think, should be more of a standard at this point. Maybe someone can let me know if there's a reason that they think knives shouldn't have a rounded spine, or if they prefer it for some reason. I vastly prefer having a rounded spine. It feels so much more comfortable to me. It also feels fancier. I don't know if that's weird to say, but it feels like they've taken an extra step to just smooth this knife out in a way that if they had just lopped it off like everybody else does and is just 90-degree angle corners there, it just wouldn't feel as designed to me. Like, this feels like they've taken the time to go an extra step. And I can't imagine it's that hard of a step to take when you're manufacturing a knife to just round this edge. Whatever cost it adds to the knife, I feel is worth it. I genuinely appreciate that they've done this on this knife. It makes it so much better to me. And then, here's a rare case where I love jimping. Giant Mouse crushes it on jimping. It's my favorite thing about my GM2 as well. The rounded spine, and then the way it gets to all the way up here. Almost everybody puts jimping right here. I don't know why. I don't know who decided that that was the spot for jimping, because this spot is better for jimping. When I'm holding the knife in a typical saber grip, sure, my thumb wants to land there, but I don't need jimping right there. It doesn't make sense for me to have jimping right there. That best case, if jimping is done really well right there, it doesn't bother me, but I never find that I prefer having it there. Putting jimping all the way up here, however, when I'm using this knife outdoors, I'm feather sticking or something, I'm pushing through a reasonably hard material, and I'm making push cuts, which is the way that this grip works. That jimping is so welcome right there. It feels fantastic to have that little spot where my thumb can land and index and get held in. Because back here, I don't feel any issues with my thumb slipping around a little bit. Like, the type of cutting I'm doing with the knife in this grip is less precise than when I choke my thumb up and I'm trying to really get control over a blade. This gives me that control in such a better way. And the way that they do the jimping too, it's this nice, really tight, finite little cut pattern that just, it's not too sharp, but it's got just the right amount of grip for me. This is a rare case where genuinely I appreciate the jimping that they've done here. If more jimping was done like this, I'd do a lot less complaining about jimping. This is functional, good jimping. And when I don't want to use it and my thumb lands back here, I've got this nice, smooth, rounded spine that feels very comfortable for my thumb to land on. And then when I'm getting serious and I'm going to push cut, it's right there. It makes so much sense to me. That is a knife that is designed to do a certain thing. They didn't just add jimping because everyone adds jimping. They put jimping somewhere that it makes sense because they know when they use this knife, that's where it makes sense to have it. I dig that. Bravo to them, because that is what jimping should be. Anyway, this has been 20 minutes already. That seems like a pretty good amount of first impressions. I'm going to keep carrying this knife. I'm going to keep using it. I'm going to have it in pocket a lot over the next week or so. And pretty soon, I'm going to have a full review on this. But I am floored. I am so thrilled that Giant Mouse has come out with a knife that spoke to me before I got it. The design was something that I was drawn to, the specs I was drawn to, and then I got it, and it's one of the better knives that I've tried in a long time. It's genuinely really good. It can stand on its own 2 feet as a fantastic offering in the market. This is a knife that if I don't start finding flaws with in the next course of the week that I'm using it, I will be recommending this knife to a lot of people if it continues on the path that it's on. It is a fantastic knife. And the cost of this knife too. This knife was $185, I think. With shipping, I paid like $200 even. That's really, really good for Elmax, Micarta, nested liners, fantastic pocket clip, nice features like a rounded spine. Like, that's a good value to me, especially being an Italian-made knife, because oftentimes Italian-made knives can be a little overly expensive in my opinion. So I feel like this is a really compelling offering. I know right now they're sold out. I'm not sure when they'll be coming back, so sorry to those of you who missed out, and this just adds fuel on the fire of you wanting one but not being able to get one yet. But it's really, really well done. I'm impressed. So my first impressions are that it's impressive, and that'll be that. I gotta keep hiking, so I'm gonna move along. Anyways, this is the Giant Mouse Ace Grand, and it's pretty grand.